I want to introduce David Verba and Brandon Schauer, who are going to talk about their new book that's just out, and we have some copies for everyone here. They come from Adaptive Path, which was in a way a competitor of the company I used to work for, IDEO, and I was always just astonished at the productivity of this small firm of about 35 people. They've been in business just 7 years. In that time, they've written 5 books now, starting with The Elements of User Experience by Jesse James Garrett. And this is in their spare time when they're not designing stuff for clients, right? They also, you could argue, like, did Al Gore invent the internet? But you could really say that the folks at Adaptive Path had a lot to do with kind of the birth of Ajax, and they coined that term, Ajax. I think that was Jesse James Garrett as well. They wrote Observing User Experience by Mike Kuniavsky. They wrote Designing for Interaction by Dan Saffer. And they've done 2 spin-outs, of which one was acquired by Google, MeasureMap, and we have some alumni from that organization here. And Get Satisfaction, a really interesting sort of Web 2.0 interpretation of how customer service works, is recently launched. So it's really an impressive kind of IP generation and community building consulting firm, and I'm thrilled to have you guys here with us. So I'm going to leave it at that, and let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good intro.
Quick sound check. Is my mic working? Cool.
Okay. So I'm Brandon. This is David. And just to check on time, we should keep it at, what, 30, 40 minutes? What do you think? OK. So we may step it up just a little bit. But we're here to talk about Subject to Change, a new book that's coming out of Adaptive Path. And what is it all about? We named it this because we believe there's certainly a lot of change going on, a need to deal with it and find a way to deal with it. And so what we took is the time to say, what are some processes or techniques that can deal with all that's going on? So I'm going to show you stuff we all know, but just to sort of set the tone of the background. So think of media, for example. It's certainly a mess. If you're a newspaper, Craigslist certainly has taken away all your classified ad money. So you have no revenue there. Everyone, including y'all present, are taking away the ad revenue, and blogs are taking away the readers. So what do you do if you're a newspaper? It's really tough and difficult, and that changed really, really fast. Music as well is changing very, very fast. iTunes last month, of course, became the #1 retailer, beating out Walmart. That's kind of weird. Folks like Live Nation, who are concert promoters, have started signing artists. So Jay-Z, Madonna work with a concert promoter to release their records, not a label. Also, bands are releasing and debuting albums via Rock Band. So that's really, really weird and really odd, and so that scene is changing as well. Travel, also very odd, because last month, the top-rated carriers in terms of service, the quality of service, think about this. The quality of service, top-rated, were low-fare airlines. So what in the world does that mean when we're getting lower prices but higher quality from newer airlines rather than the old traditional ones? So things are changing kind of quickly. We can keep on going and talk about industry after industry where these weird kind of fluctuations are happening. So the big theme here is that a lot of change is happening, and it's really hard to predict what's going to happen 5 years, 3 years, 1 year out. So how do we do that? Because predicting the future has always been hard, but now it's even harder. So if predicting the future is not going to be something that works, if we can't be that accurate about it, how do we deal with that? Traditional organizational methods, let's meet about it. That's not going to work, obviously, either. Our traditional ways of handling problems through bureaucracy and other means doesn't work. So what this book is really about is how are we going to find approaches that work no matter which of our theories on how things are going to change, what approaches are going to work in any circumstance. And so what we tried to put together in the book is some ideas about what those approaches are so that we can sort of talk about it and really think about that and put that in the dialogue that's out there.
So we're going to go into the Wayback Machine and start with a history lesson that kind of points to the importance of experience as a goal. So in 1886, Scientific American released this special supplement about a new photographic apparatus that was deserving of a special supplement because it was so advanced in terms of ease of use for photographers, especially photographers in the field. They called it the most practical of systems for the itinerant photographer. And it was the most practical, like I said, because it was far easier than anything that came before. But there's easy and then there's easy. So if you look at the instructions that came with this device, it's a full page of relatively dense documentation, starts at the letter A, goes up to the letter S. There's 19 distinct elements that the photographer had to keep track of. And in addition to this, of course, there's all the kind of extraneous related stuff around film, developing film, doing prints, kind of everything associated with making photography a kind of a complicated hobby or profession to be involved in. Interestingly enough, right about the same time, George Eastman was around. This is the slogan for the company that he launched. And his role was, he was an inventor, and he invented a kind of new medium for film, a roll film, as opposed to having the emulsion on plates or sheets. And he could have taken his invention, and he could have invented a new camera, and he did. And this is the camera he invented, the first Kodak. And the instructions for the use of a Kodak are these. You pull a string, you twist a knob, and you push a button. You push the button, and Kodak does the rest. So what he did was he actually realized that he could take advantage of his new technology, and he could have just built another camera that was in the same line as the previous camera. He could have made it smaller. He could have made it more portable. But what he did is he said, I'm actually going to take away the complexity so the customers don't have to deal with the complexity. I'm going to set up a plant that's going to take care of all that stuff. And what the customer would do is they would buy one of these cameras. It would have a roll with 100 photographs in it, a roll film for 100 photographs. They would take the 100 photographs, they would ship it off to the factory. The factory would remove the film from the camera, develop it, make the prints, reload the camera, ship the whole thing back to the customer. All of a sudden, photography was accessible to everyday consumers. Because the vision that Kodak had was he focused on the customer experience. He realized that his goal as a businessman was not to create, on the basis of his technology, a more perfect, technically perfect camera. But his goal was to make it easy for customers to take photographs. And while that distinction seems minor, as it played out, obviously, it had tremendous impact and a tremendous difference in how that unfolded over time.
So Kodak chose to focus on customer experience. What does that mean? Well, this is one of the sort of very abstract traditional models we think of when we think of developing products and services. Maybe you start with data at the core, layer logic on that, business rules, those types of things, and then build out the user experience that the customer actually touches. This is a good traditional model for thinking about the full system. Interesting thing is that, of course, customers don't think of it this way. They think of it as this way. There's a user experience, and then everything else is just magic. So I know we in this room very much think of the prior model because we have to make it work. But from their point of view, this is how the people we build products for actually think of our products. This is why we say the experience actually is the product they're receiving. This is the only thing that matters to a customer. It doesn't matter how it works under the layers. It doesn't matter how things are put together. It matters what the experience is, and that's what they're actually buying. So if we go back to this model, oftentimes the approach is to think outward from the data, building out to the experience, because that's the method we have to probably take in terms of building out a solution. But inversely, we can start as well from the outside in and talk with customer expectations, think about what the experience is we're trying to create, and work backwards and think about, OK, what's the alignment we need between data logic and the user experience to pull that kind of experience off. To think from the product that the customer is buying, the experience, and work backwards from that. So again, the experience is the product. This is the core of the message we want to talk about today. And we want to lay it out in a couple of ways. We're going to talk through these 4 sections. The idea that how do you focus on experience? How do you focus on the lives of customers? embrace the complexity of change, and learn to live with it, and then engage in design as an activity that can help you deal with unpredictable futures.
So if you want to focus on experience, one thing that's really helpful is to actually have an explicit stated experience strategy, or have some internal understanding within your organization of what are you actually really trying to accomplish, what are your goals. And an experience strategy has to accomplish several things. An experience strategy is not necessarily a horribly complex document. It doesn't have to be like 100 pages of fine type that sits in a binder in your archive of document doom. But what it is it's something simple that you can use as a guideline and as a guide as you're developing a product. For example, Palm, they had a simple idea that they had their prototype, which was a block of wood, and anything that fit on that block of wood could fit in the product. And if they had to remove something to fit something else on the block of wood that was more important, that's what they did. The Newton, by example, tried to be everything to everybody and actually kind of failed in the market partially because of that. So George Eastman, he had you press the button, we do the rest. That was kind of a marketing slogan. But once again, it was something that he could use to guide the development of his product and the service that he was offering. An example from here is the Google Calendar. Before Google Calendar was launched, there was certainly a lot of calendars on the market and on the web that could be used. Google obviously didn't want to launch something that sucked. So their team came up with a list, a vision of what they wanted it to be. This vision is actually a really great example of what you can use as an experience strategy. It has things like they want it to be fast, visually appealing, and joyous to use. Joyous to use is not a specific description of a feature. You're not going to have a functional spec that has item 12B is joyous to use. However, it's still a guideline to what you can do, right? If you're designing a camera that has 19 distinct elements that you have to use before you can take a picture, that's probably not joyous to use. So trying to strike this balance between being not so specific that you're talking about specific features, and yet specific enough that it gives you a guideline, a ruler for making decisions, or something that you can use as a generative guide to coming up with ideas of new features and that you may want your product to actually do. Drop dead simple to get information in the calendar. Drop dead is not exactly a formal development term, right? But it's clearly understood by the team what you mean by that. And it's clearly, you can use that when you decide what you're going to try and do, what your calendar is actually going to, what features it's going to have, how it's going to behave. All those kind of things are really important to have something like this behind you. Obviously, when the Google Calendar launched, it had tremendous uptake. Arguably some of this was Google could get a lot of eyes on their calendar, but it would not have had this uptake if it had not fulfilled, at least in a major part, this vision that they had behind it. Another great example of this kind of strategy is Flickr. On their About page, this is an even older example, we want to help people make their content available to the people who matter to them. We want to enable new ways of organizing photos and video. These are kind of very clear statements of the experience that Flickr wants their customers to have with their service. And because they're very clear, it allows them to not get lost in the details of what exactly they're doing, but it allows them to figure out, oh, we need to have an API so it's easy to get stuff in and out of here. We want to make it really easy for people to get photos in and out and share it with their friends. It really guided the development of their service. So one thing you can ask yourself if you're developing a product or you're launching a new service is, does your experience have a North Star? Do you have a common understanding within your organization and across your organization of what you're actually trying to accomplish? And it should be focused on the experience, not on specific features, but on the experience that you're trying to provide to your customers. Is it specific enough that you can use it as guidelines to make decisions across multiple layers? Because the decisions you may make from this may affect the visual design layer. It may affect the interaction design layer. It may affect features that make it into the product or are omitted from the product. You want to be able to use it as a guideline for all the multitude of decisions you're going to have to make as the product is developed over the course of time.
So next up, talking about focusing on the lives of customers. And from our perspective, this is about understanding them as actual people, understanding people as people, because we have a lot of ways as organizations for understanding our customers. Oops, I went forward. one of the ways is we go out into the world to understand them, and it's very much the Steve Zissou kind of experience of going out into another world and looking at them from the other side of the one-way glass, the one-way mirror, and seeing them and treating them like creatures to be studied, foreigners, okay? And that's not necessarily the right approach to it because we separate ourselves from them. We assume they are unlike us in many ways. We don't necessarily understand them as deeply as we possibly could. And that sense of depth is what's really missing. The companies often oversimplify how they understand customers, especially when you're in the early stages of coming up with things like an experience strategy, early stage of product development or service development, where you're really trying to get at what are needs that are very maybe tacit or unspeakable from a customer's point of view, but are something that can make a really, really great product. Later on, of course, you need simple definitions of demographics and other things to track what's happening on, but those kind of very simple definitions aren't very useful to you when you're trying to figure out what's a product that people are going to love. So let's go first through 4 of the ways, old ways, of companies and organizations use for understanding their customers. One way, the worst way possible, we know no one here does it, is taken from the Clue Train Manifesto, which talks about organizations that treat customers as gullets whose only purpose in life is to gulp products and crap cash. But we've all probably been treated by an organization like this and felt that way, and we probably left them very quickly if that was possible. Then in other cases, there are telcos. Another approach that organizations use for understanding people is the term Homo Economicus. It's people who are very rational in how they behave. That these are the organizations who think very much about price and demand kind of charts, that if something's more expensive here, the customer will go over there to get a cheaper version of it, that we measure everything and are thoughtful in our choices and how we interact with products and services. To maybe on a macro scale, this could be a little bit true, but if it really was true, we would all just be a planet of Vulcans. And in reality, we pay, lots of money for coffee at one place when we could get it much cheaper somewhere else. And we make all sorts of irrational decisions based on things much larger than the rational quantitative figures we have in front of us. Another way organizations think of customers is an approach that was born greatly out of the HCI movement of understanding people and understanding how to make products usable for them. So what are the goals they have? What do they come to the experience with? And how are they going, what tasks are they going to use to actually accommodate those goals? And while that's very helpful for usability studies, perhaps, it also treats everyone sort of like a type A personality. Like you're here, you're a robot, you're going to get it done, get out, be done. In fact, we behave irrationally a lot of times with products. There's messiness in how we sometimes choose to spend a lot of time with them, sometimes want to use them in bizarre ways. And so this isn't a completely realistic way of understanding people. It's still very shallow. Finally, one of the ones that I think at Adaptive Path we get the most aggravated about is this approach, where we feel an organization feels their customers are people to be preached to be shown the way, to give them the right message that's going to hook them on and keep them as a customer. But customers aren't sheep. They have free wills. They are going to leave you if they want to, and it's not purely about messaging and getting that right idea in front of you. There's countless number of Bud advertisements at the Super Bowls that never followed through, and they never saw an uptick in any of their sales. Even though people thought they were hilarious and they were great messaging, they didn't actually connect with people. People aren't sheep. So none of these are necessarily completely wrong. There's all appropriate ways to think about them, except for maybe the first one from the Clue Train Manifesto. But none of them are completely right. What's happening is, overall, the approaches are being evolved. We have new ways of understanding people, and we know kind of what's missing from that formula. Things like the messiness of human life. There are a lot of bizarre things that go on. And in that messiness are great ideas about how we can serve people based on how they're behaving and what their messy kind of needs are. Just to take a couple examples, people use products to fit their needs, so they combine them often in weird and unusual ways. Whether it's things like putting your remote control car and your Swiffer together, that's an extreme, or whether it's dunking your donut in a Guinness, also a little bit of extreme. But people cobble together solutions to fit their own lives, and in that is a lot of richness of new ideas and new opportunities. Another thing is people blending old and new, crossing boundaries that aren't usually crossed. So the bizarre world of monks using cell phones is an extreme, but this is actually an interesting story. This was an overpass near the Adaptive Path office in San Francisco. Someone had actually spelled this out in, I believe it's duct tape, on a highway overpass. This is a weird mixing of public and private. What do you? Yes, it was not mine. Did she marry me? No, it was not my message. I actually can spell, is one of the big differences. But you kind of wonder, did she actually agree? Because he can't spell. He obviously has a strange sense of romanticism.
I think you had to use the second L to make the question mark. I think he ran out.
Yeah, he could have run out of tape. He's into efficiency. Very much so. So people do weird things, crossing strange borders that especially are coming around public and private, especially these days. So how do we actually understand people as people? That's the real goal here, is how can we break down these shallow definitions to start getting at the deeper needs people have to drive product and service development. One of the key ways is empathy, that they are not truly that unlike ourselves, and that we can go a great deal to spend time with them and understand what is going on in their lives, so that we bring that understanding back to our own work, that we build empathy for what they're trying to achieve, what their needs are. And from the perspective of what's been missing, what are their emotions? And we'll go a little bit deeper on this one in a minute. What's their context? We recently are doing some service design with a group that does online payroll. And they saw metrics where there's an immediate drop-off at certain points in the experience. Usually you think, OK, that's a usability problem. There's something wrong with the interface. That wasn't it at all. People were going away to get other documents, or if they're doing payroll, they're probably the boss, and other things are interrupting their lives. So that's the larger context of what's really going on. And when you just look at it from the thin straw hole perspective of maybe usability or interaction with this one product, you lose that bigger context. Meaning as well, what is the relationship I have with this product, with this service? How does it connect me to other people, and what role does that fill in my life? It starts to attach meaning to the products and services we use. So from the emotional standpoint, this is a quote from Don Norman, who's done a lot of thinking in terms of emotions and human factors. And this is what he writes. I'm going to do the bad thing and read my slide. Because of new scientific advances in our understanding of the brain and how emotion and cognition are thoroughly intertwined, we scientists now understand how important emotion is to everyday life, how valuable. So that's his official explanation. But in other works, he goes on and explains a different story, which is when he was at Apple Computer as their human factors expert, he did a study because he was really confused why they were thinking about moving to color monitors away from just grayscale. So he brought down a color monitor to his lab, did a lot of testing to see if people could accomplish those tasks and goals that he set out. There's absolutely no difference between how well someone did something with a color monitor versus how well someone did with a grayscale. So he did the test, published the results, great, very happy with it. Weeks went on, and then the operations department said, hey, can we get that color monitor back? And he said, I didn't really want to give it up. So there's something there, and that's not the official explanation, but I think it's a lot more meaningful in terms of, yeah, you may not be able to rationally say it achieves people's goals more quickly or that it's more efficient, but there's a layer of engagement that happens through emotion that we often don't design for, and we don't take time to stop and go, okay, what are the emotions someone should feel through this experience? What things should we try to engender through their interactions? So we're going, hopefully, from a world of thinking about tasks and goals and preferences to a world that's thinking much more about what are the emotions we want to engender, what's the context someone's actually working in so that we can design for that context, especially true in the world of mobile, for example, and what kind of meaning can we build of this product and service in their lives. So the big question this comes to really is, do you understand your customer as a person? Or are they just a demographic? Or are they just a persona?
So the next thing to talk about is embracing the complexity and using systems to support experiences. As we've seen, the products and services we're trying to deliver are often complex. Eastman, around photography, there was a lot of complexity, and he took that in to take it away from the customers. The customers themselves are complex, but there's other things that complicate the picture even further, largely internal things, that experiences don't often match the internal structure of the organization. So this is a government website. It's actually really great because they can actually split the customers into those that need hay and those that have hay. It's easy to envision a business that fulfilled the needs of these customers that had the hay acquisition department and the hay disbursement department, right? That's a relatively simple case. But what's more often the case is you end up with something like this. So Adaptive Path did some work with this large financial firm. And they had an issue that every month their customers would receive these really dense financial statements about how their investments were doing. And these statements were oftentimes hard to decipher. They would summarize things in odd ways. And if the customer looked for supplemental information on the web properties were all from an entirely different department out of the IT department, which meant that they would use different language. Things would be summarized in different ways. And if they called somebody on the phone, the call center was an entirely different department. There was no congruence between how these three departments thought about the financials, even the numbers that they had access to. So from the customer point of view, the company was really unable to give them a cohesive whole experience. And we see this all the time, that if you want to provide this experience to your customers, oftentimes internally, you're going to have to really pay explicit attention to how are you going to work internally within your organization to cross those boundaries, to cross those silos, because that's the only way you're going to deliver an experience to the customer that actually makes sense. So it's complex. The customers are complex. The products are complex. Our implementation environment is complex. There's a couple ways to deal with this. One is to kind of put your head in the sand and hope that everything will turn out okay. One is to try to plan the hell out of it. Get 50 people in a room at the beginning that are domain experts and try and plot out the development of your product over the course of the next 5 years and hope that nothing changes. There's no changes in the marketplace, new competitors, and everything stays the same. Those aren't likely approaches to work. You really have to understand that we're working in a complex field. You want to take approaches that really take advantage of the complexity. One of the principles of agile development is not only do they want to be able to allow for change during the course of development, but they want to be able to harness that change to end up with a product that's even better than the one that was originally intended. Likewise, if we adopt approaches that allow for this complexity and allow us to respond to complexity and change over the course of product development, we're in a much better situation. So there's certain things that tend to be really useful to do. Approaches that have a fair bit of iteration in them, whether that's time boxing for a physical product or some sort of agile approach where you get to a release and then you iterate on that release. One of the things that allows you to do is it allows you to make decisions, the appropriate decisions at the appropriate point in time when you have not only the most information but kind of the most appropriate information about what to do. It allows you to fold in over the course of the product development. It allows you to fold in new information that you find from customers using early versions of your product, new technology that may arrive on the scene, kind of any number of things. And being able to do decisions in this kind of just-in-time method is really, really useful in delivering a more valuable end product. The other thing that tends to be really useful is things like prototypes. Once again, we're dealing with complex issues. It's really hard to get 50 people in a room and figure out the entire complexity and how all the pieces are going to fit together without actually starting to build something to see how the pieces are going to fit together. And whether that's sketches on a whiteboard as a really low fidelity thing, but building software prototypes to make sure things are going to work, to put software prototypes in front of potential clients to see if they're going to enjoy using it or not, to build functional hardware prototypes to feel what it's going to be like. If you have an insulin pump, you're not going to know what it's going to feel like to walk around for a week with the insulin pump strapped to your body until you build something that has the same form factor as that insulin pump, shove a needle in your gut, and walk around with it for a week. That provides really valuable information, right? So the other thing that you have to think about is collaboration. Oftentimes, the best approaches, or the approaches that are going to be most successful, are approaches that cross normal organizational boundaries, and really spending some explicit time figuring out how you're going to cross those normal internal boundaries so that your IT department talks to your design team, talks to your marketing folks, talks to product leads. Getting all those people in the same room and communicating is tremendously important. Now, there's some things that actually make this a little bit easier. We're going to see this example again shortly in the next section. But here we've got two pedometers. We've got one on the left. It's this standalone device full of features. You got the Nike iPod system on the left, which also has a physical device, but it has this software and web component. And what that means is after 6 months, the device on the left is still the same device that you bought, right? But the one on the right, there may be software updates. It may be an entirely different beast by that point. It has new features. It has new functions. With the growth of embedded processors and network devices, mobile devices, products that have some sort of software component, it's a lot easier to find yourself in a situation where you're developing not just a standalone device that you're going to sell to your customers, but something that's more like a platform. TiVo is a great example of this as well. If a VCR, which probably there's not too many of those anymore, a DVD player perhaps, compared to a TiVo, the TiVo you bought 2 years ago is not the same TiVo that sits in your living room today because there's been software updates over time. And just even things like physical prototyping is a lot easier. 3D printing and a whole bunch of other technologies make fairly complex physical prototyping a lot cheaper and a lot more accessible to pretty much anybody that wants to pursue that as a regular line of business. We're going to go to story time now because this is a story about ClearRx, which kind of illustrates a couple of these points and has a rock music.
In 1999, Deb Adler was a graduate student at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. She was looking for a topic for her thesis project when she heard about an accident in her family. Her grandmother had, by accident, taken her grandfather's medication. Looking into their medicine cabinet, she wasn't surprised at all by the error. They had the same medication, but at different doses. Their bottles looked identical, except for the first name printed on the side of the bottle. She did some deep research on the problem and discovered that 60% of Americans don't take their medication properly at home. Deborah uncovered many frightening stories of people misreading or missing critical information on their pill bottles and dying because of it. One man died because he thought the bottle said, "Take every morning," when in fact it said, "Take every Monday." So what wasn't obvious to others became obvious to her. The design of the pill bottle was a serious problem. Further inspection showed that the problem wasn't just a graphic design problem or an industrial design problem, but a systemic problem. The pharmacy, the pharmacists, and computer systems all had to be involved in a proper solution. So in school, she created detailed prototypes of the solution. Then, after graduation, Deborah went to work with Milton Glaser, who gave her the confidence to take the idea to Target. While state regulators could have helped Deb slowly implement the solution, she knew a national pharmacy could have much more impact more quickly. Target saw the promise of the new drug delivery system embodied in the new pill bottle design and took the risk to implement it. Target saw a fit between the superior and safer design for drug delivery and realized how well it fit within their stores, their brand, and their sense of how design can add value. The final design included a clear visual hierarchy of information, a flat front for easy-to-read labels, a different colored ring for each member of the family, and numerous other improvements. Here's Deb talking about the huge collaborative and systemic effort it took to implement what Target called the ClearRx system.
It was an enormous undertaking, and I should stress that I did not work in a tunnel at all. It was a huge collaborative effort. I worked with the pharmacy team, pharmacy operations, the Target technology team to build the software to accommodate the new labeling system, the marketing team. There were major training sessions to train all the pharmacists on how to use this new system because they were the most important people to us. They were the front line. They had to explain how to use this new system, and they had to learn how to use it. There was a bit of a learning curve involved.
Target's drug sales increased by an estimated 14% the first year after the debut of the ClearRx system. People regularly drive out of their way to get to Target to use the ClearRx drug delivery system. Business magazines and network news have covered the solution, and the Surgeon General has thanked her and Target for their contribution to the health of all Americans.
Okay, shut that up. But what I love about that example, that was a little bit long, but it illustrates so many things. One is, this was a really complex system. I mean, the idea on one hand is really simple, but to actually implement it, there was a lot of different pieces that had to be touched. It is not the kind of thing that a group of people in a room could have sat down at the very beginning and figured it out. And if nothing else, when you hear her talk about it, she had to go to each individual state, and each individual state has all these complex labeling regulations that you have to follow that are all different. Prototypes were really important to this, kind of an iterative approach to get there, and a real emphasis on collaboration across internal boundaries. This is the environment in which we're trying to deliver products to our customers. So one thing you can ask yourself, once again, is what are you doing to harness change? You're in an environment that's complex. There's probably going to be changes over the life cycle of your product. What are you doing explicitly to be able to respond to that change and really use it to your advantage?
Thanks. So last point, engaging in design as an activity. I think this is one of the key aspects that can help, for example, that iteration, the ability to be nimble, the ability to think of things from a customer's world and understand them much deeper. And this is actually my favorite section to present. So we're going to talk about design as a way to accommodate all of that and really bring it in as part of an organization's real competency of what it does well and what does it take. So there's 5 ways to think of design that we have come up with. One is design as aesthetics. It's that very superficial layer at the end of the experience that people have. Don't really like that one, although it's partly true. Design is a distinct role. It's that guy down the hall with spiky hair, great shoes that no one likes to work with because he's a prima donna. Don't like that definition. Design is a thing, so it's the result. It's what you have at the end. But I think that ignores all the work up to date that's necessary to produce that great result. And then finally, design is a rock star. There's certainly been a lot of press lately on the power of design and design thinking, and puts it at a level, I think, that's a bit beyond what everyday people want to engage with within an organization. So I'm not really happy with that definition either. So of course I'm going to come up with my personal definition I like, which is design as an activity, something that anyone can engage in. The idea of looking at a set of components, thinking about how you can arrange them in an elegant way that can create more value than they had independently, that's something anybody can engage in. That's something anyone can do. You may not have the design, finishing skills to create the aesthetics, but we all have the experiences. We all have the ability to go out and see people in the world and have empathy and generate good solutions for them. So I think of design as an activity that an organization can embrace, everyone can get involved in, no matter what their background is, that we can all work on iterating on new ideas and pushing it further and further forward. So design as an activity, actually in the book we cover 3 different ways that you can think about a competency within an organization, building a competency in design. Idea is sort of or design as an idea fabricator, testing them out, vetting them out very quickly, trying to reframe some of the uncertainty and how can design be a part of coming up with that. But what I'm going to spend some time on is one of my favorites, which is the idea of the long wow, creating a long wow customer experience. So let's jump into that. This came from the experience of going out into the world and seeing people who were part of some loyalty program and they really weren't turned on to it. We did this with a financial services company. They thought they had a great customer loyalty program where everyone had an ID. They were assigned to one of 3 gold, silver medallion sort of levels. And actually when we went out and talked to people, they had no idea they were in a loyalty program. They didn't know what the benefits are, and they really didn't care. They just wanted the great products and services that they were trying to pay for in the first place. So This is actually a real hard place to work in if your knee-jerk reaction is, hey, we have a loyalty problem with customers. We want to build a better relationship with them. Let's just build a loyalty program and have some loyalty cards. Let's assign them IDs and put them on different levels and have them behave as we want them to. But it's a crowded space. There's lots of people who are already doing this and interacting with customers this way. And in fact, I think of this quote from the CMO of Orbitz, that if you want loyalty, get a dog, because no one's just going to behave loyal to you because you gave them a card and some special status. You have to go a lot deeper to really form a long-term relationship with people. So I'm going to turn to this sage advice about loyalty. It's sort of akin to what we're talking about, the Grinch, who said, Christmas isn't something you buy from a store. Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. I think loyalty is the same way. You could just replace Christmas here with loyalty. That loyalty isn't just something you can assign to someone or formalize a relationship over. You have to nurture that kind of relationship if you really want people to come back to you again and again. So what does meaning more mean? So I'm going to read my slide again. Meaning more means creating notably great experiences. So true loyalty, the kind that's not fabricated, evolves naturally from the great experiences you have with a company over time. And over time is a real key word. How do you continuously please people over the long time frame? So notably great experiences are punctuated by moments of wow, when people are delighted by the products or services, when you're able to anticipate their needs in unexpected ways and pleasantly surprise them. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had recently where people are like, that really wasn't expected from them, and I really loved it. And you can probably think back through your own experiences of times where that has happened and has made a difference to you with an organization who's done something unexpected for you. So this isn't just random theory. This actually comes a little bit from the world of science. Peak end rule, which was developed by Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel scientist. He actually won his award for work in, I think, risk theory. But this is another one of his works. Imagine these are two different experiences you're having with two different organizations over time. That is, the time is from left to right, and then as the curve goes higher or lower, that's your experience getting better or worse. So if you want to say, like, how do people think about their experiences, you'd usually go, well, let's just think about the area underneath these curves. When they think about back to this experience, that's what they're having. So these two experiences might be relatively similar in the total volume of the quality of the experience you had with them. But actually, in doing research, they found out that's not at all true how we think about experiences. When we think back to an experience, we remember the peak point, whatever was the strongest, whether it be a positive or even if it's a negative. We remember that, and we remember where the experience ended. So on the bottom one, maybe even though it has the same area underneath the curve, the peak experience might be much taller, even though the two experiences end up the same. And so what we remember is an average of these two. So this asks some interesting questions. For example, it doesn't really behoove you to have an experience that is continuously even across the entire relationship you have with someone. It might make more sense to make sure you have no negative experiences, of course, because someone's going to remember something that's sharply negative. But it also might make sense to pick points in time where you can really stand out. It's something that your organization does really well and better than anyone else, and deliver that as a wow moment, something that maybe someone didn't expect and went out of the way for you to deliver. So the long wow we broke down into a few core things that we saw people who were doing this really well and people we worked with on these kinds of problems had to put together to create this platform for delivering wow moments. So first is knowing what your touch points are, managing that as a platform for delivery. So when you have a wow moment, you know which parts of the touch points to bring together to go, here's what we're delivering and here's how we're telling you that it's great. Second is drawing from a wide area of unmet needs. What's an unmet need that you can go back to again and again and again and find new things? Like OXO Good Grips goes back again and again to the world of of cooking and the need for simple things that are easy to hold and easy to use. And that's never going to end for them. They're going to continuously find new things to develop in that world. Evolve a repeatable process. Look inside your organization and find what it does well and does well repeatedly, and integrate design capabilities along with that so that you can deliver these wow moments again and again, and actually thinking through and planning the wow experience. We're going to talk about staging it and how that's done. So planning out a wow moment, how do you do it? There's a lot of pipeline thinking, actually, in terms of what are we going to do now, what are we going to do later, and further on. A lot of times there's that desire to have one big release where you throw out all of the features all at once and have a big, overwhelming experience. But one of the really interesting strategies is how can we maybe pace things out over time so each customer can enjoy and appreciate the different new experiences that we're allowing for them over time, and that you can build that kind of relationship where they start to expect and enjoy these kinds of moments of surprise from you. So David presented these two different pedometers, one that's going to be the same one every time you use it, but another one that's going to unfold in new experiences over time. So let's dive into that a little bit. The Nike Plus pedometer, no interface on the actual device, but when you get home and you sync it up with your computer, all sorts of interesting things happen. So suddenly you're able to visualize your run and see where you slowed and where your pace got faster. And this is something that's never possible before. It's something that that old pedometer could certainly not do. And this is features that they rolled out with the product initially, the ability to look at your run over time, and then eventually they added the ability to start mapping your run as well to see what distances you want to go for and plan out your route. So that's kind of cool, and a small wow moment in terms of being able to synchronize your tracking with the device and visualize your run. But then there's other cool things. So you're on a run, okay, and you're jogging through, and based on your chart, you slow down at a certain point, you start to feel winded, it's kind of tough, so with one touch, you just go. So, the odd thing is this is actually the #1 downloaded power song from the iTunes site. So I don't know what people are thinking, they just need to get their Rocky on. But power song, another little wow moment, something that other pedometer certainly can't do. But they've also built in other things over time that have new abilities that you just can't do any other way. The idea of collaborative running, that you can run somewhere in one geography, you can buddy up with other people who are running, you can compete or try to build mileage together and work collaboratively, whatever it happens to be, but certainly your running buddy doesn't have to be in the same space anymore. Another interesting thing is events. Runners love to go events. You feel very emotional along with other people. It's a great thrill. You used to have to be in the right physical location, but now Nike said, hey, actually that's not such a big deal. We can actually extend and make networked running events. And so they've added on these new kind of features over time where, for example, you don't have to be co-located to actually take part in an altruistic pleasure of running for a cause. So the Nike solution has all these little touch points that they've introduced over time, and through those touch points, they've been able to stage and release new things that customers aren't expecting over time and have delightful little experiences all along the way. And they've even added on new touch points like desktop widgets, or Nike has started producing a sports band that gives you a digital readout that you can see while you're running. So all sorts of interesting things can come out of this. So that's the long wow, the idea of having these things together so that you can continuously start to deliver those little moments of wow as you're working with customers. And so the big question here is, are you building a platform that can actually create these wow moments over the long time of your relationship with a customer? Because I think that's where true loyalty actually lies.
So the goals we had writing this book were to, this sounds a little bit like marketing speak, but there's some authentic feeling behind it, to articulate a new approach to creating products and services in an uncertain world. And address a gaping hole in how companies serve people. This is something certainly we've seen within Adaptive Path, that there's actually a tremendous opportunity here. And so there was a survey that was done, I believe it was done last year, right?
Actually, it's around 2003.
Okay, done some time ago. 362 firms, they asked them, 95% say they are all customer focused. And of course, everybody says they're customer focused. Nobody's going to say, we hate our customers. And I'm sure they all take your complaints very seriously. However, of these 95%, 80% say they deliver a superior experience. You actually get the feeling that these firms actually really do believe that they deliver a superior experience. But then the survey went to the actual customers and asked the customers, of the firms that say they deliver a superior experience, how many of them actually deliver that experience? And can you guess at the number? It's low. Close. 8%. So that's, in one sense, that's kind of a scathing indictment of a company's understanding of their customers. But on the other hand, it's actually really a tremendous opportunity there, that there's a lot more that we can do in terms of the products we create, the services that we provide to our customers. There's a lot more we can do to actually match our customers' needs, to provide value and valuable experiences to our customers. So that's it. That's the book. There's copies up here, which I believe are free for you guys at this point. So stop by and pick one up. And maybe we have 75 seconds for questions.
Thanks.
You mentioned going for the big peak, the big wow.
Yeah.
And then you also said, well, why don't you spread that out over time?
Yeah.
So is there some amount of wow that you're shooting for each time? That's ideal.
Yeah, how do you quantify wow? That's an interesting problem. I think that the iterative approaches David was talking through can help you actually pilot and test whether things were really unexpected or not. I mean, I think you can pretty quickly tell from a real customer's reaction whether it was, wow, that was really interesting, or no, it wasn't. Bank of America was testing out new ATM machines in my neighborhood. And so I went up, tried out the depositing of checks, where they show the actual, you don't use an envelope, you just stick the check in, it scans it, shows the image back to you on the screen, and says, we think this check is for $50 because they use OCR to read the value. And all you have to do is say, yes, great, done. The woman who was next to me was also doing the same feature functionality using the check deposit. And she went, oh, cool, and started to bring me in to look at what was happening. And then she realized that might not be a bad idea because it was personal information. But that was a clear, you could evaluate that and go, OK, that wowed her. It was unexpected. It was delightful. And if it's not doing those sorts of things, it's not a wow moment. Could they have scaled that back? I think that's a tough question. I think that's a hard, that was a single interaction with a customer. I think that's probably the unit of interest, is a single interaction. You don't want to break it down finer than that.
Yeah, I would actually say, that's where having a platform rather than a specific kind of feature-laden product is important. If you have a platform, you can continue to innovate. You can innovate in the wrong way, too. I mean, Facebook obviously released some features lately that were less than optimal for their customers, right? But you can also, those kind of moments are really hard to have in theory. You can't ask your customers sometimes what they want. You have to kind of deliver it and see what the reaction is. And I'm sure, I've read a lot of descriptions of features that never get me excited until I actually use the feature. And then you say, that really is cool. Sometimes it's really hard to judge the wow until you actually see it in real life.
Wow moments aren't always hard to achieve. I got a mail from ING the other day where they had the privacy statement written in plain English in about 3 paragraphs. It's like, cool, I like to work with you because I actually understand what your privacy stance is. That's cool. Didn't take much, some good copywriting and just a sense of what might be important to people. Cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming. Grab a book if you want one.